A trainer at SeaWorld Orlando rushed to the hospital after she was bitten by a killer whale.
For decades, orca shows have captivated people with their dazzling displays of synchronized jumps, powerful splashes, and a seemingly unbreakable bond between killer whales and their human trainers. Families flock to aquariums to witness these majestic creatures up close, drawn by the grace, intelligence, and spectacle of the performance. Yet, behind the choreography and applause lies a more complicated reality where the line between trust and danger can blur in an instant. Despite their trained routines, orcas remain apex predators, and history has shown that even the most experienced handlers are not immune to sudden, tragic turns. Join us as we take a look at one such moment, the heartbreaking and terrifying last moments of trainer Marina Lysaro. From the time she was a young girl, it had always been Marina Lysaro's dream to swim with the giants. She was drawn to the sea and the majestic predators that ruled it, so that dream became her life's goal and, eventually, her life's work. She spent years in rigorous training, building bonds with the ocean's most awe-inspiring creatures, bonds that few could even imagine, let alone understand. No one could have predicted that this fantasy she fought so hard to make real would one day turn into an unimaginably horrific nightmare. It happened on a warm, sunny June afternoon at Ocean World Orlando, a calm and fun-filled moment that was soon shattered by panicked screams. Settle in as we explore the chilling account of what took place that fateful day and how the story could have been different had clear signs been heeded. Signs and attack. The main character of our story isn't just another animal trainer new to the game, but one who was revered in her field. By the age of 33, she had already earned legendary status in the marine mammal training world. Her connection to the animals went beyond routines and rehearsals, especially when it came to orcas. That passion had never wavered, and among these apex predators, one orca, Nyla, held a special place in her heart. Nyla was a titan, 19 feet long, weighing over 8,000 pounds, and with a commanding presence that had captivated audiences for years. Captured from the wild waters of Iceland in 1992, Nyla had become the centerpiece of Ocean World Orlando's most acclaimed shows. Her sheer power and grace in the water made her a spectacle no one could forget. To Marina, though, she was more than a performer or centerpiece attraction. She was a partner that she had come to connect with on a deeper level. Their seemingly mystical connection was one often whispered about between her colleagues and even some regular audience members. One colleague once said, "Marina and Nyla were something special. There was a kind of magic between them. When they swam together, you could see the trust. It was real." That trust seemed unshakable, and for 10 years, Marina and Nyla performed in perfect harmony. Their routines weren't just exercises and training, they were works of art. The audience would erupt in applause as Marina danced in sync with Nyla, the two of them spinning and diving as if they shared a single mind. Marina's style of training was a bold one, even for veterans. She didn't just train orcas, she bonded with them, lived alongside them, and knew them in ways no one else did. One trainer said, "She wasn't scared. Most people deep down are afraid of orcas. Not Marina. She had this calm and control. She could command attention from Nyla with just a look." Behind the stunning performances, there were darker moments, close calls that made some uneasy, subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. Unfortunately, these warnings were too easily brushed aside. Nyla, for all her beauty and strength, had a history, a pattern of subtle aggression that surfaced every now and then. Tail slaps, missed signals, and sudden bursts of defiance were just some of the things being taken note of by those weary of her erratic behavior. Trainers also witnessed moments when Nyla would snap at the water or display behaviors that pointed to frustration, such as jaw-popping and abrupt lunges. Perhaps due to carelessness or greed, those moments were downplayed and often explained away. Someone would say, "Orcas in captivity behave like this. It's natural. They're wild animals after all." To Marina, Nyla wasn't just a show animal. She was a collaborator, a friend, and to the public, the main attraction and elegant star of Ocean World. These These were perhaps enough reasons for her and the heads of Ocean World to ignore obvious safety concerns. Nyla was born in the frigid, dark waters off the coast of Iceland, where she was ripped from the wild and thrust into a world of performances, routines, and confined pools. At 19 feet long and 8,000 pounds, she was one of the most powerful animals in captivity, and her movements and very presence mesmerized the audience. Although she was a well-honed aquatic killing machine, her beauty was undeniable, and the knowledge that one such apex predator had been tamed probably made the shows all the more intoxicating. At first glance, Nyla seemed like any other orca, smooth, coordinated, and elegant. But her past wasn't something openly discussed. Most never knew the details of her behaviors that were starting to get more frequent. A pattern of missed cues, ignored hand signals, that distinct sound of a jaw popping open and shut in irritation. Sometimes she lunged at the water unexpectedly. The explanations came just as quickly as concerns were raised. It was attributed to stress and routine agitation, many of which were chucked down to typical behaviors for an animal confined in such an unnatural space. A former trainer admitted, there were signs, little things, clues, but no one really wanted to talk about them. It was easier not to. The show had to go on, so most of it was ignored. But a few people paid closer attention, and what they saw was troubling. Underneath Nyla's show-stopping performances was a seething anger and a quiet fury that had been ignored for far too long. The stress of captivity, the pressure to perform, and the need to maintain an illusion of control were just some of the things that quietly ate away at her. As an expert, and with her level of accomplishment in the field, Marina saw the signs. She understood the language, and she did know Nyla better than anyone else. Unfortunately, even she couldn't predict what was coming, and it came faster than they could anticipate. At the park, it was a steamy summer afternoon, one of those days when the heat beats down mercilessly. The air was heavy with the sound of children laughing, and the smell of salt water wafted through the air. People were pouring in, ready to be enchanted by the most extraordinary creatures on Earth. Among them, there was one show that everyone looked forward to the most, the Dances with Giants performance. They assumed that today would be much like any other day, since it was already a favorite with the audience. People began to come in as the gates opened at 2:30 p.m., their voices filled with anticipation as they found their ideal seats. The arena was completely full. The pool's water glistened in the sun, mirroring the sky's dazzling blue. Backstage, Marina Lysaro, who had become known for her distinctive performance with Nyla, remained composed and collected, as she always did. That day's stunt was planned to be special. Marina and Nyla had practiced it endlessly. It was an audience-pleasing routine that showcased the orca's strength in a lovely choreographed dance where Nyla would raise Marina from the water on her rostrum. So both the timing and the precision needed to be spot on. She had devoted years to training with her, developing a close relationship with her, and learning her every move. However, things were different today. The atmosphere was tense right from the start of the show. While she awaited Nyla's signal, Marina assumed her position, but the orca took its time to reply. With an unexpected hesitancy, Nyla's enormous form glided through the water as she lingered in it. Marina waved her hand in the way that always got Nyla to swim over to her, but this time, she wasn't quite as responsive. Marina probably thought Nyla was just being a little bit stubborn and picky with her responsiveness, but that wasn't a big deal. After all, she trusted her. After a few minutes, it was time for the stunt, and Marina stood by the pool's edge prepared. Everyone in the audience was staring at her and Nyla. Something changed as Marina went out to signal Nyla to come closer with her arm. The orca broke with tradition, and for the first time, Marina got worried. While she did love Nyla to an almost devoted level, she had worked with her for years, and she could immediately sense that something was very wrong in this moment. Unfortunately, while she was worried, she didn't think it was serious enough to get out of the water. To get back into the groove of the performance, she splashed water on the audience while smiling and trying to captivate them, but Nyla hadn't finished yet. Marina was abruptly grabbed by Nyla. the tremendous force of her teeth clamping down on Marina's arm, causing shock waves to travel across the water. Marina was instantly paralyzed, both in fear of what was about to happen and due to the orca's overwhelming strength. The audience was oblivious because it seemed to be all a part of the performance. Marina, on the other hand, was desperate to get herself free, but Nyla would not release her hold. Thrashing and splashing drowned out all other sounds as the water surrounding them swirled ferociously. It seemed as though time froze in those dying seconds. In her efforts to make sense of the mayhem, Marina's thoughts raced. Marina felt betrayed in front of hundreds of shocked visitors by the connection she had trusted and worked so hard to cultivate over the years. The orca Nyla, whom she had grown to love, had changed from her cooperative nature into a more predatory one. The trust and connection they had formed were immediately broken. Little did the onlookers know the genuine terror that was about to be unleashed on them. Marina Lysaro saw it as completely separate from the performance, whereas the audience saw it as an integral part of it. There was a sudden and dramatic shift. After being Marina's reliable companion for a while, Nyla turned into an unpredictable wild card. The sharp teeth of the orca dug deep into her body, causing her excruciating agony. During Nyla's drag of Marina under the sea, her body was horribly jolted. Above ground, the terrified screams of those who were seeing the unfathomable had become their only companions. The ragdoll-like body of Marina was tossed about. No matter how hard she tried to escape Nyla's clutches, the water around her churned with an angry ferocity. Even though she gave it her all, Nyla was the stronger opponent. With each drag under, her lungs burned as she gasped for air while attempting to get detached from the predator she had once played with. The audience had realized something was off, and their screams were only about to get worse. The stands were engulfed in mayhem, and uncertain about what they were witnessing, some were shouting and pointing towards the water. Members of the staff hurried to the pool's edge, where they quickly set up nets and sounded alarms in an attempt to get Nyla's attention, but the orca paid them no mind. As one of nature's apex predators, it wasn't easy to distract her from her goal, and Marina was all she cared about in that moment. Marina briefly surfaced from the water. Her pale complexion and wide eyes betrayed her terror as she inhaled heavily, right before Nyla plucked her under once more. Another time, at precisely 2:48 p.m., Marina's face emerged from the water. She was shaking and barely holding on, but she kept staring into Nyla's eyes. Her strength was dwindling as she gasped for air. Every time she tried to break free, the orca's firm hold on her and the water's pressure pulled her back in. Everything seemed to come to a halt at that very moment. No one could do anything but watch, as the harsh truth played out on screen for the viewers and employees. A lady who had once loved the water and a predator who had been born to rule it fought desperately for survival in her final hours. Their trust had been broken by an uncontrollable natural force, and Marina was no match. No match. Finally, at 2:55 p.m., the lifeless body of Marina was pulled out of the ocean. She was dragged onto the damp concrete of the poolside as the orca's hold loosened. She seemed lifeless, with water streaming down her hair and clothing. A show that turned into a nightmare wasn't what the crowd had anticipated. Paramedics rushed to her side as they desperately fought to resuscitate her, attempting everything they could. There was obviously no life left in her, despite their skilled and precise techniques. As if stunned into stillness, onlookers attempted to make sense of the sudden turn of events. The staff persisted in doing CPR, but it was a very costly effort. The light of life in her eyes has long since been snuffed out. The coroner confirmed that she had drowned and suffered blunt force injuries. The orca's deadly bite and the many times she was submerged had cut off her oxygen supply, rendering her lifeless. However, as the authorities commenced their investigation, it became evident that the atrocities of that afternoon merely represented the surface level. The animal protection authorities and OSHA wasted no time in beginning their investigations. One burning question now remained on everyone's mind. Why had Nyla suddenly turned on Marina? This was a serious issue, and authorities were determined to get to the root of it. Soon, they unearthed a series of unsettling truths. Despite her apparent innocence, Nyla, the orca who seemed to be the ideal companion, had a hidden past. Word got out about a pattern of long-ignored behavioral warning signs, including subtle displays of hostility, incidents during training, and instances of disobedience on Nyla's part, which had been discreetly downplayed or explained away. Now, it seemed like the attack on Marina was one that was scripted to happen long ago. The clues had been there all along, discussed in private. The trainers had warned about Nyla's crazy episodes, when she would strike out or display her anger most horrifyingly. Unfortunately, the warnings were disregarded due to the park's reputation and the desire to save the brand, as the whispered warnings went unheard. There was a lot of confusion and sadness in the days after her terrible death. The death of an inspiring individual who had devoted her life to helping the animals she adored has left everyone, from the trainers, guests, and even staff, mourning in silence. The homage to Marina came fast, a memorial held at Ocean World to celebrate her life and her legacy. Friends, relatives, and colleagues gathered to commemorate her. There were tears, there was stillness, and in the midst of it all lingered the ever-present disbelief. A bigger question, though, started to surface amidst the mourning, and that was the justification of keeping orcas and similar animals in captivity. There was an uptick in the volume of people demanding explanations. The tragic loss of life of Marina Lysaro has reignited the need for the emancipation of all orca species held in captivity. The demands for reform were increasingly audible as the debate intensified. Working with these remarkable beings and showcasing their intelligence, grace, and beauty had always been Marina's goal. Despite her faith in the connection she had with Nyla, her dream came to an end in the precise location that had provided her with solace. What happened in the ocean that day was not simply the loss of a life. It was the result of years of exploitation of animals forced to live in environments they were never meant to be in. Wild hearts were never designed to dwell behind glass. They didn't belong in a tank, but rather in the open water. The tale of these creatures was far from over, even though Marina's tale was coming to a close. After the memorial ended, the world started to reevaluate its position on captivity in response to the questions and demands for justice that had resounded throughout. As time passed and the news cycle shifted focus, many people couldn't help but think of Nyla, the orca who had danced with Marina, drifting aimlessly in that enormous blue tank. It was never her right to live that way. Sadly, Marina and Nyla's case isn't a unique event, but one that has played out far too many times over the years. Let's take a quick look at some of them. Tragic repeats. One of the most infamous incidents is that of Tilikum, a male orca involved in 3 human fatalities. Captured near Iceland in 1983, Tilikum spent his early years at Sealand of the Pacific in British Columbia. In 1991, during a training session, 20-year-old trainer Kelty Byrne slipped into the pool and was pulled underwater by Tilikum and 2 other orcas, leading to her drowning. This incident prompted the closure of Sealand, and Tilikum was transferred to SeaWorld Orlando. In 1999, Tilikum was linked to another death when the body of a man was found draped over his back in the pool. The man had reportedly stayed in the park after hours and entered the orca's enclosure. The most publicized incident occurred in 2010 when experienced trainer Dawn Brancheau was killed during a dîner with Shamu Show. Tilikum grabbed her by the ponytail, pulled her into the water, and inflicted fatal injuries. Another famous incident is the death of Alexis Martinez. On the 24th of December 2009, just 2 months before the death of Dawn Brancheau at SeaWorld Orlando, another tragedy unfolded thousands of miles away at Loro Parque, a marine theme park in Tenerife, Canary Islands. Alexis Martinez, a 29-year-old experienced trainer, was killed by Quito, a captive-born orca on loan from SeaWorld as part of their global breeding and performance program. Martinez was conducting a routine training session in preparation for a holiday show when Quito suddenly turned aggressive. In a shocking burst of force, the orca rammed him in the chest, causing fatal injuries including massive internal bleeding, broken ribs, and lung trauma. Despite the rapid response of emergency teams, Martinez died from his wounds shortly after. Initially, Loro Parque and SeaWorld described the incident as an accident, and early statements attempted to downplay the nature of the orca's aggression. It was left to internal reports and an autopsy to later confirm that it had been a direct attack. The orca had reportedly ignored signals and acted unpredictably in the days leading up to the incident, but warning signs were dismissed or overlooked, following a pattern seen in other facilities where similar incidents had occurred. The tragedy shocked the marine park community, particularly because Quito was not a wild-caught whale. He was born in captivity in 1995 and had spent much of his life performing and training with humans. His behavior was supposed to be more predictable, even reliable. The fatal attack shattered that assumption and raised alarm about the unpredictability of even captive-born orcas. Alexis Martinez's death prompted widespread questions about the relationship between trainers and orcas and the standards of care and risk management in marine parks. Unlike the U.S., where OSHA later intervened after Brancho's death, Spanish authorities were slower to enact reforms, though public pressure grew. Former colleagues and animal behaviorists suggested that Quito had shown signs of stress and aggression before the attack, signs that were either misinterpreted or normalized within a culture that often pushed trainers to prioritize show quality over personal safety. The use of powerful orcas for elaborate tricks in confined environments was becoming increasingly controversial, and Alexis's death became a rallying point for critics of the marine park industry. Although Loro Parque made some changes following the incident, Quito and other orcas remained part of the park's shows. Like many others in captivity, Quito continues to perform, even as the memory of what happened that Christmas Eve continues to haunt the marine animal training world. Public and legal reactions. While public discourse has often focused on the human lives lost or endangered in these incidents, less attention has been paid to the psychological toll on the orcas themselves. Marine biologists and former trainers have increasingly emphasized that orcas are highly intelligent, social animals with complex emotional lives. In the wild, orcas live in tight-knit matrilineal pods and can travel over 100 miles a day while communicating in a complicated yet mature language system. Captivity inevitably strips them of these essential parts of themselves. Former SeaWorld trainer John Hargrove, featured in the documentary Blackfish, described seeing behavioral decline in the orcas he worked with. He and other whistleblowers noted increased signs of anxiety, aggression, and depression in the animals, often correlating with time spent in small enclosures and social isolation or forced cohabitation with incompatible species. The phenomenon known as captivity stress can manifest in a variety of ways, which include repetitive behaviors and floating listlessly at the surface and aggression toward other orcas and humans. Many of the orcas involved in serious incidents, such as Nyla, Telecom, and Cato, had documented histories of behavioral instability, yet continued to perform in shows. The wave of attention brought by Blackfish and public outcry after incidents like the death of Don Brancho spurred a series of legal and political reactions. OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, took decisive action in the wake of the SeaWorld tragedy. In a highly publicized trial, SeaWorld was found to have willfully violated safety regulations. OSHA's ruling prohibited trainers from entering the water with orcas during performances, dramatically altering the nature of orca shows. California took the movement further. In 2016, the California legislature passed the Orca Protection Act, which banned orca breeding and the use of orcas for entertainment performances. The state's largest park, SeaWorld San Diego, transitioned to an educational exhibit model shortly after. Other parks began to follow suit, though some facilities still operate under older models elsewhere in the world. For decades, parks like SeaWorld operated under the dual pressures of public entertainment and profit. Trainers were often encouraged to develop close relationships with the animals and perform increasingly daring stunts, an approach that was seen as necessary to thrill audiences and generate revenue. However, critics argue that this system placed both human and animal lives at risk. Internal reports from some marine parks suggest that management often downplayed aggressive behavior from orcas to preserve the image of the shows and avoid public concern. Trainers sometimes expressed unease about this culture of silence, especially when their own safety felt compromised. In the years since the Brancho tragedy, SeaWorld has attempted to change its brand toward conservation and education. The company announced an end to its breeding program in 2016 and pledged to cease theatrical orca shows entirely. While the United States has made strides in restricting the captivity of orcas for entertainment, the global reaction is slightly different. In countries like Russia and China, the marine entertainment industry continues to grow, with new parks being constructed and wild orcas still being captured for display. In 2018, 11 orcas were found in cramped sea pens off the coast of Russia's Far East, a situation that was termed the whale jail by activists. Though international pressure eventually led to their release, the incident reignited global concern over the continued exploitation of these animals. In China, several newly built marine parks have included orca shows as major attractions, with little regulatory oversight and limited welfare protections. Meanwhile, countries like Canada have moved towards stronger protections. In 2019, Canada passed a landmark law banning the keeping and breeding of whales, dolphins, and porpoises in captivity, a movie praised by animal rights organizations worldwide. The cultural narrative around orcas has undergone a dramatic transformation over the past 2 decades. Once seen as exotic stars of aquatic performances, they are increasingly viewed as victims of human exploitation. This shift is particularly evident among younger generations, who are often more conscious of animal welfare and environmental issues. Attendance at parks like SeaWorld has declined since the height of the orca performance era, reflecting this changing sentiment. Additionally, public figures and celebrities have added their voices to the cause, further expanding its reach through their fan base. Activists have organized protests, social media campaigns, and petition drives, keeping the issue in the spotlight. Documentaries, books, and educational programs now emphasize the intelligence and emotional depth of orcas, contributing to a broader understanding of why captivity may be fundamentally incompatible with their needs. The legacy of orcas like Nyla has become a rallying cry and a reminder of what happens when spectacle outweighs ethics. The future of captive orcas remains uncertain. Though progress has been made, more than 50 orcas remain in captivity worldwide, many of which were born into concrete tanks and are unable to be released into the wild. The question now becomes how to manage their care humanely and responsibly as public demand for performances fades. Some experts advocate for the creation of coastal sea sanctuaries, protected ocean areas where formerly captive orcas can live out their lives in a more natural environment. These sanctuaries could provide a crucial middle ground, offering enriched space, social opportunities, and the ability to swim greater distances while still ensuring medical care and safety. The Whale Sanctuary Project, for example, is currently developing such a facility in Nova Scotia, aiming to house orcas and belugas retired from marine parks. These initiatives offer a potential model for the ethical phase-out of captive cetaceans, while acknowledging that many cannot be returned to the wild after decades of human care. No one would ever forget Marina Lysaro and Nyla's story, and the unanswered concerns regarding the real price of captivity and the broken trust between people and wild animals that persist. The mechanisms that force animals like Nyla and others of her species into such tragic situations remain valid topics of discussion by activists and even audience members scarred with first-hand knowledge of the events. What do you think of the incidents and who's really to blame? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. To enjoy more exciting videos, click play on the video on your screen. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notified when a new video drops.